So tonight I want to talk to those hyper independent women out there. I know you're out there. I know you're in your midlife, and I know you're feeling up against a wall. I think it's time for us to have a conversation about how always being the fixer, always being the one that people go to get help has a shelf life in our lives. And by the time we hit our 40s and 50s and 60s, that shelf life is beyond expired. And we're now into burnout. And that this is sometimes one of the largest contributors to symptoms of what we would traditionally think of as a midlife crisis. So today's podcast is going out to all of you who find yourself in that position where you've always been the person that people call. You've always been the person that knew the plan or could figure out a plan. Everything is figure outable. I think Marie Forleo said, I like the idea of that. And I've aspired to that idea most of my life. And pursuing that chase has some drawbacks that I think are probably creeping into your life right about now. So let's talk about it. Welcome. You're listening to The Centered Midlife, a podcast that teaches women in midlife to unapologetically stop silencing their dreams and start designing the lives they want to live in. I'm your host, Dr. Natalie, and as a clinical psychologist of the last 2 decades and a twice divorced single mother myself, I not only know how hard it can feel heading into midlife, I am living it right here with you. I have taken all the many failed attempts and lessons learned in my own life and combine it with my extensive clinical experience to give you the tools you need to make midlife the best time in your life. No joke. So let's get started. Welcome back to The Centered Midlife as we try and regain our sense of self-worth from the inside out. So today's podcast is really specifically focusing on those of you in midlife, those women that find themselves in those positions where you feel like you are so hyper independent, so like you're the problem solver, you're the one that people call in the middle of the night, you're the one that takes care of everything for everybody else. And one of the most common features of having this kind of hyper independence is that you probably never ask for help, almost never. And if you do, you feel extremely uncomfortable with the idea of it. And sometimes when you're given that help, even if you didn't ask for it, you ingratiate yourself with just thank you to those people because it feels awkward to be receiving that help. If this sounds like you, then today's podcast is all for you. And I had an epiphany about this recently while I was listening to someone talk about how the hustle, the chase, is always tied to a dopamine. It's a dopaminergic network that we're working on, right? So it's this pursuit piece that is the reinforcer neurochemically on the inside. What does that mean, Dr. Natalie? Well, what happens is if we're always seeking to be the person that independently can take care of everything, it's always a pursuit. It's always a chase. When we do that thing, it's not the reinforcement. It's the pursuit of always being that person. That's the reinforcement. And the neurochemical that's tied to that is dopamine. And dopamine, if you don't know, is one of the neurochemicals that is part of addiction. Right? So is it possible that we have really almost gotten addicted to this cycle? And so that feeling of discomfort, it isn't just a feeling of discomfort. It is a feeling of extreme discomfort, even, dare I say, like it's withdrawal, like we don't know how to handle it, right? So Let me tell you a little story. I recently ran into an individual through a work situation who, how I would describe this is this person is invested in being offended, invested in being misunderstood, misheard, and almost with every single person that they're with has a bone to pick, right? Like find something that that person has done wrong. And then of course they have this big blowout about how they just can't handle it, that people would treat them that way. And I've had a run-in with this individual a few times in the last, I would say, I don't know, 6 months or so. And it has always ended very uncomfortably for me. It has always ended with this person not liking me. Right. And I can tell you from my family history, that idea, that feeling of I didn't solve this, I didn't fix it, it feels like a life or death threat to me. Maybe you're like this too. I don't know. But in my family history, I was left with the three younger kids. So I'm one of five children, but I'm the middle child. And there was a big gap between our two older siblings and the three younger siblings. And so they always called us the three little kids. But I was like the oldest of the three little kids. And I was responsible for these two humans a lot of the time. It was the 80s. Yes, our parents like kicked us outside, locked doors, told us to come back when it got dark. Like this, it's true. All the Gen X crap, it's true. This is just how life was when we were younger. And in a chaotic household with an alcoholic dad and a codependent mom that was always trying to pacify an alcoholic dad, this got really tricky because I was really responsible for making sure that they were always okay. Always okay. And I would say that I did that fairly good most of the time. But seeing as I was only 2 and 4 years older than these two, and they were my brother and sister, I mean, you do the math. Like there were always going to be fights. There were always going to be things where it didn't work out. And this behavior of I am responsible for fixing it really was solidified for me, at least in my conscious memory in that time of my life. So, I mean, it's shown up in different ways all through my life. But what I'll tell you is that that feeling of life or death is really about the fact that chaos would get even more chaotic if I didn't fix it. If I didn't fall on the sword, if I didn't, figure out how to appease everybody, if I didn't at least get every people out of my parents' hair, then I became the problem. Like then it was my fault. And so I have really developed over time almost an addiction to needing to be liked at the end of this stuff. Like I need to solve the problem and I need to be validated that I did it right, that I was okay. And that works for me most of the time, to be honest. As a hyper independent woman, I would say that I've kind of cashed in on that, like in my career for sure, as a single mom for sure. But in many respects of my life, it's been an advantage for me to always see a situation and wiggle my way out and do so in a way where all parties feel good about it at the end. All parties feel great, right? Most of the time. So then what happens when somebody's not happy? When somebody's not happy, I have a whole different response. So let me give you another story. Shortly after my second divorce, I was working for an individual at a group practice, and they asked me to take on some administrative duties. They knew I was looking for extra work, and I think they wanted to keep me at the group practice because I was a lucrative therapist. Like I brought in a lot of clients and I kept my clients, all of that kind of stuff. Plus I was a supervisor. So it made sense, right? Like they wanted me to stay on. They could tell as I was going through the divorce, I was going to need more money, made me an offer. And I said, sure, I'll do this administrative stuff. So I started to do it and negotiated what I thought was a fair rate for doing that per hour, handed in all of the hours at the end of the month because I was a contractor that was paid month to month. And I was paid 50% of what the agreed upon contract was. So here's me, right? Like I'm in the pursuit. I'm going to chase this. I'm going to get a lot of dopamine hits if I can make this person both like me, but I can solve this problem at the same time. And I fought for myself and described how I had read and agreed to this contract. And they did some finagling. I don't know. Their version of events, very different. I have to be honest. The company was not being as lucrative, I think, at that point in time. So I kind of wonder if they were just trying to short me and talk their way out of this piece of the contract with their fancy wording with it. But I mean, all was on the up and up. I thought we were kind of, copacetic and they liked me, right? Like that was my cue that I was still in pursuit and still going to fix this thing. It couldn't be fixed. It could not be fixed. And when I tell you that I derailed, like I can't even explain to you how difficult that was for me. Now, of course, the good news with that derailment was I ended up going out, pursuing my own private practice, did much better for myself on my own. And I might not have taken that uncomfortable shift had this discomfort of somebody not honoring the contract in the way that I had signed it occurred. All that to say, I spiraled and spiraled and spiraled for a minute. One of the things I did is I did an itemized list. I mean, I had already given them like, here's my timesheet, all the things I did, but I started to kind of like plot out all the things that I had been doing that I wasn't really reporting fully, the kind of side stuff, the hallway conversations, the other administrative help that I was providing to this person. Like I would spend hours in a notebook just charting. I've only done that one other time that I could think of in my adult life. And that was during my separation or just before my separation from my second husband. I started to make a list of all the reasons that once my daughter was 18, I would let myself leave him. I started to I started to spiral then. Like I was not being seen. It was not being liked. I was not being well deserved. And so I started to try and basically justify myself. So this is a behavior in therapy when I see it with clients where you're trying to explain yourself. That's really what that is. Like you're spending a lot of time talking to try and convince the other party that what they're thinking is not correct and what you are is correct, to reduce that conflict that you're feeling or that discomfort that you're feeling. Although for me in this hyper independent way I had to be liked at the end of it. I had to not only solve the problem, but I had to do so in a way that everybody agreed with me and thought that I was doing the right thing. The spiral was big. It prompted me to leave that company, which ended up being good for me. But it was a time where I had really not started to recognize that behavior, that pattern yet. So recently, when this has shown up again, and this individual through this work environment has clearly shown this pattern with other people, I realize there's another layer to this for me now that I still have to work on in my midlife, because it's left me excruciatingly uncomfortable, to be honest. I realized that I want to be better than most people with this. Like that, it's my hyper independence, but it's also like this sense of self-worth that I have gotten from being the one that, could fix it beyond what other people could do. So I really wanted this person at the end to like me, even though they weren't liking other people, that they were doing this pattern with other folks where they would just read into things and see things in a very narrow way that made them a victim in those circumstances. And then, of course, they would get very aggressive. So they kind of oscillated between being a victim and being an aggressor against people who had victimized them, but only seeing the world in that dog eat dog world. And I pride myself on, in this hyper independent, I'm going to fix it and you're going to like me at the end of it way, was pursuing the chase of getting them to like me. And anytime I've left a situation where I felt like it was, okay, maybe I did it. Don't touch anything. It's like you leave the room and you're like, please don't touch the table. Everything will fall down. My little house of cards. Well, the house of cards fell down just again today. And like the spiral started to try and set in, and I wanted to prove myself and I wanted to justify myself to another individual that was also involved in this situation, explain why this person is just this way and that's what it is. It isn't me. It isn't my thing. It's their thing that they can't seem to see the world in any other way than victim and aggressor. And so either I'm being their aggressor or I have to be their victim, right? I don't like this. I really don't like this, people. And this hyper independent streak in me of not asking for help is not helping me in this moment. If you hear any part of this story and identify, I want you to listen. What we talked about in my previous podcast was this idea of that lighthouse, like shining your light, like giving out your life force to those who want to see the light, but not going out into the waters of that bay and tugboating every single person back in. That is a waste of your energy and that will burn you out. And this hyper independence is that's the function, right? We're going out and trying to grab everybody one person, one boat at a time. And I've done that with this behavior, with this pattern. Now, luckily, I've done enough work for myself that I start to see the pattern. So I was reflecting on it tonight and thought I usually try to record these during the day, but I thought I'd try to hop on and just kind of, put my thoughts out there because I think this could be helpful to somebody else. So the answer remedy that we talked about in the podcast last week was self-love, right? The best thing you can do in a moment like this is see where you're making mistakes and you're causing your own dysfunction, your own suffering, and say, hey, but I love you anyway. Right there, Natalie. It's okay. It's okay. You're mucking this up, royal. You're in the pursuit dopaminergically. You're almost addicted to the chase of trying to make this work again and again and again and again. And instead of doing that, we're going to just take a step back, not betray ourselves in that way, because the act of justifying yourself implies to you did do something wrong. It implies to you that you're the one that's at fault. It implies to you that you're the one that's responsible for fixing. And in actuality, there's two people here. Like I've clearly laid that out, right? Like psychologist Natalie can even see, this pattern, this interpersonal pattern that this person has, and recognize it clinically, but I can't seem to not involve myself in it clinically because of my past, because this was solidified in childhood, and I've even watched it show up in my adult life in an unhealed way, unhinged, me just going off and spinning. So because I know that this is a pattern that I have to interrupt, I know the antidote is self-love. It's not to betray and abandon myself. I want you to think about this for a second. Are you somebody that's hyper independent on one side, can fix things, is the person that everybody goes to ask for help? On the other side, are you somebody who fears abandonment, who fears rejection, who is really sensitive to being left, not asked to the party, I want to say no to the party because I'm an introvert and I don't want to spend my energy, but I want to be asked to the party, right? Like it's this you on the other side that there's this really distinct fear that you'll be left, that you won't be loved, that you won't be noticed, that you won't be understood, right? Is that possible that that's happening on the other side as well? So hyperindependence might be a not so good pattern that you got into over time to mask from that. Like if I hyper independently fix everything, well, if I don't fix it, who's to blame? Me, right? Or I might get into one of those justification spirals and I'll blame shift it onto somebody else. What if the reality is, some humans don't get along with humans? What if the reality is, I don't need to be liked by everybody to not be abandoned? What if that's the reality, right? What if the way that I'm acting is based in fear and scarcity? The belief that, oh my gosh, if one person doesn't like me, there's kind of this cascade, like I won't be loved, won't be liked, will be abandoned. If I can test that false reality by loving myself and letting somebody hate me, I might be able to shine my light and realize that boat didn't want to come into the bay, didn't want to see it, wanted to crash itself on the rocks, right? And it wants to tell me that it's my fault that my light didn't shine over there, but that's not on me. And I won't be abandoned or rejected by all people in my life if I don't fix this one piece here. I can only get through that when I can admit to myself that I have a behavior where I chase that too much, probably fueled by ideas of I'll get left behind, right? We'll go back to little Natalie in my house with the 3 little kids, and I'm in charge of my younger siblings. Well, the chaos in my house often ended in stonewalling, silent treatment, other gross things like that that the alcoholic would do. Either they were big, bare, scary, or completely emotionally unavailable. Just cut us off, right? Because I didn't do it right. And that was the way to teach me how to do it better next time. Well, no wonder I have that pattern, right? And I can own that now in my adult life. And I can own how I might be still vibrating at that level when people who are at that level meet with me. Sometimes we can control having those folks around us. We can just say, hey, not my friend anymore. Like, bye-bye. Sometimes they're people that you run into at work and you're not going to be able to say no. Like, they're going to be there. They're at the same job. You're not in control of that. I guess you're in control of staying at the job, but if most of the job, like 99% of the time, is okay, and this person is not running into you but every few times every 6 months, maybe you should buck up. Maybe you should learn how to not spiral, how to sit in your own dysfunction of wanting to spiral and wanting to justify and wanting to blame shift and wanting to make them like you and fix it that way. And just love yourself in that brokenness, recognizing that's your pattern and letting it go. Letting it go. That's it. It's simple and it's effortful. So I want you to hear that again. It's a simple concept that might be the most heavy lift you've ever had to do. Like, seriously. I'm going to be 50 this month. I'm going to be 50, right? I've been doing this for a long time, decades of my life. I have been a contributor and participator in my own suffering over and over when I don't recognize that this pattern has some dance steps I'm engaging in. Not all of them, some of them. And if I can just love myself for making that mistake over and over and over, embrace myself where I am, and let go of having to do the same thing that I've done all my life, I might give myself an opportunity on the other side to feel a little bit differently. Learning to love yourself, learning to love the story that made you the way you are, right? Learn to love that story. Learn to love even the dysfunctional parts of yourself. That in midlife is the recipe for what will course correct burnout, feeling neglected, feeling like you have to abandon yourself in order to absorb love and affection from other people. It starts to remedy and right that. And you won't really see the fruit of that at first. You kind of have to take the leap to catch that net. You don't know it's there. And that's scary. I know. I hear you. I want you guys, if you're listening to this podcast, to send it to at least one other person that you know has found themselves in this little funk. Because I am not the only midlife woman. I've helped other midlife women that do this very same thing. And I want us to start to get that word out there. It's all about slowing it down, loving yourself despite your mistakes, and letting it go. No matter how effortful that is, no matter how heavy a lift that is, it is the right thing for you. And over time, it's less of a heavy lift. I mean, listen, I could have spiraled on this for days. Only, maybe a couple years back, even months back, I spiraled on it for a lot longer than I did today. I kind of just self-reflected right after it happened and decided I got to let it go. Do I have the discomfort inside? Absolutely. Do I want to fight myself? I'm fighting myself from picking up my phone, texting people and justifying myself. Yep, I am. But I'm going to let it go because that version of me feeds a cycle that isn't true. It isn't true that I'm going to be abandoned. And I don't need to self-abandon and justify myself every time I'm afraid of that because I already know that cycle ends up in me feeling more abandoned. Duh. So I'm going to let it go. I want you to let it go. I want you to start to learn to love yourself in the muck, in the mistakes, and see when you leap what's coming next. It's kind of exciting at the same time. all those things can be true. Simple concepts, effortful heavy lifts, and real excitement on what could be next in your life. So remember, ladies, you are not the problem. You are not broken. You are not in a midlife crisis. If you want to have a centered midlife, finding peace and building up your self-worth from the inside out, then I want you to keep listening. Because I am a licensed clinical psychologist in the state of Minnesota, I have to make sure at the end of each of these episodes that I give you the disclaimer that none of the material that I talk about in these podcasts is meant to replace any kind of therapy or formal medical or mental health treatment. And in fact, anything that I offer on my website, my coaching programs, any kind of psychoeducational materials that I release are not a replacement for that level of care. So just take that into account when you listen. This is information for you, and hopefully you find it of value, both as an educational tool and for your entertainment. And I also want to mention that if anyone you know is in a mental health crisis, needs additional help, I always include these two crisis resources. They're available to anybody. Pick up the phone and dial 988 for the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline. And you can always visit their website at suicidepreventionlifeline.org. Additionally, there's actually a crisis text line. So if you're not somebody that likes to pick up the phone, text HOME, home, to 741-741 to the crisis text line. And you can find them online at crisistextline.org. Thank you for listening to my podcast, and I hope that you like and follow me wherever you get your podcasts, and maybe consider leaving me a review. It always helps me to keep this podcast relevant when I know what you want to hear about.